Hi, my name's Phil. I like talking about politics, and in this video I'm going to be discussing yesterday's PMQs again, where, well, Starmer and Ian Blackford for the SNP, I've never seen them quite as in tune as they were. Boris Johnson knew he was in trouble. But first, if you'd like to be notified of daily news and politics, please subscribe to the channel and click the bell notification icon. Now, I have to say from the outset, Boris Johnson is always asked the engagement question. He sometimes adds some things in at the beginning as well. He's basically just supposed to say, I had some meetings this morning, and when I'm finished talking to you lot, I'm going to have some meetings later on. But he was stammering much more than usual. You know, it's difficult to tell with him because it can be an act. He does this thing about umming and ahhing because he doesn't. I'm a bit of a buffoon, me. I don't mean any harm. I'm just like that, and so you can't always tell. But what it was unusual, you know, because this wasn't him answering a question he either didn't expect or he didn't expect it to be put in that way, or he just knows it's a dangerous question. He was just basically talking about the help we've given to India and, you know, talking about the overturning of the convictions for some sub-postmasters who were wrongly convicted of fiddling the books. This was uncharacteristic. You know, when he's up for the exchange, he might and ah every now and again. He's got to remember to play the fool, but he doesn't fluff his words. He was fluffing his words. He was constantly having to correct himself before he was even asked a question. I was going to say, all he was talking about was good things. We've helped India. Oh, I'm welcoming the overturning of these convictions. This justice has finally been done for these people. But then, well, actually, it was supposed to be a backbench MP trying to ask a question, but she couldn't be heard, so they went to Keir Starmer. And he started off with his sixth with the remark that's been widely reported in the press that Boris Johnson supposedly said last October that he would rather see the bodies piled high than install another lockdown. Remember, at this point, the scientists were saying we need another lockdown. Keir Starmer, when he found out that the scientists were saying that, said, lockdown, we'll support you. We need another lockdown. Boris Johnson was alleged to have, so there must have been presumably some heated discussion, and he'd said, I'd rather see the bodies piled high than issue another lockdown. And Keir Starmer reeled off all the media that were reporting this as fact, and he's just said quite simply, did the Prime Minister make those remarks? To which Johnson got up and straight away said, no. I thought, I nearly fell off my seat. He's answered a question. He was asked a question, and he's answered a question. Boris Johnson doesn't do this. Then he tried to be cheeky by saying that Starmer's supposed to be a lawyer. I can't remember the exact words. And he said that he should substantiate the allegations and come to this House and say who said them. Well, I mean, Starmer did reel off a list of names who had reported them. Obviously, this was an inevitable question. Johnson was briefed for it. They knew he was going to be asked this. They'd gone over how to respond to it. The strategy, of course, as it always is for Boris Johnson, to go on the attack, to make out he's the victim, to sound outraged. It was interesting to note he didn't fluff his lines here. Right? He fluffed his lines about giving help to India, which would have had cross-party support. There's no problem there. And he fluffed his lines about the overturning of the convictions for the sub-postmasters. And I'm thinking, well, what's going on there? Like, he knew what this question was going to be. He'd gone over it with his advisor, delivered it confidently. So I got to wondering, he was nervous at the start, because that was uncharacteristic at the start. He does and ah sometimes, but that was fluffing lines. He doesn't normally do that. What's he fearing coming later? Don't tell me the question he's dreading was about his sofa, for goodness sake. But anyway, Starmer then said, look, somebody here isn't telling the truth. You know, because remember, at this point, Starmer's not accusing the Prime Minister of saying this. I'm going to come to that later. He's just saying, look, these people are saying it. They seem quite sure. You're saying you're not. Someone's not telling the truth. And he made the point. He said, the House will have heard his answer. And then he quoted the ministerial code. You know, classic case of laying a trap for later, you know, because Johnson obviously had to deny it. So he talked about the code as if you've deliberately misled the House, not inadvertently, if you've deliberately misled the House, you have to resign. So this is for later. And Johnson couldn't just avoid the question here, because then it would be pointed out. Now, he does do that a lot, and it is sometimes pointed out that he's not answering the question. But the problem with this is it's been widely reported. So there's a lot of the public treating it as fact that he said this. Now, some of the public may not care, but there's a lot of the public going, yeah, well, this is because this, the BBC and ITV, for example, not even the newspapers that don't exactly uphold high journalistic standards, they don't fancy being taken to court all the time for libel. So they tend to make sure of their sources, whereas maybe not always the Daily Express, but they've not been reporting it. But the BBC and the ITV, definitely, they've got to be sure of their sources. And so if he was evading it, people would just say, well, it's true then, isn't it? So he had to say no. So he's denied it. Fine. But if proof emerges, or even overwhelming circumstantial evidence for it, then Johnson will be in deep trouble. A quote like that, if widely believed, can absolutely sink a political career. It's callous. But once Starmer had quoted the code saying that if Johnson lied, he'd be expected to resign, he said, I'm going to leave it there for now. Then he moved on to his second question. He said, and this is where we get onto the flat. Now, this flat, right, look at this. Now, a lot of people have been having a pop at the style of this flat. It's hideous. It is hideous, but it's a little bit like the messy hair with him. Sometimes it's like, I don't care, right? People popping at that. It's subjective. He, or more specifically his fiancée, like that style. That's fine. I haven't got an issue with that. If that's their style, no problem. Of course they should be comfortable where they're living. I do have a question on a practical level though. Why do you spend so much money on camouflaging your sofa? Especially as Boris Johnson likes a bit of a drink, I hear. Does he get confused sometimes and fall over the floor trying to find the sofa when he's had a few? Just on a practical level, I don't. But anyway, there is the flat that costs so much money. And Starmer said, he said, who initially, and then he stops, he said, and Prime Minister, initially is the key word here, because he knows what Johnson's going to come back with. Initially, who paid for the redecoration of this Downing Street flat? To which Johnson waffled a lot, but didn't answer the question. Didn't say. He said, I've paid for it. He says, no. Who initially? Because you didn't initially pay for it, did you? So then Starmer said, look, normal, because he did go on for some time as well, Johnson, in refusing to answer the question, he spent some time. And Starmer said, normally when people don't want to incriminate themselves, they say no comment, which got a bit of a laugh. I'm not even sure just from one side of the house. And Starmer was visibly beaming, absolutely in his element. He said, let's explore this further, Prime Minister. Now, Johnson may be full of it, or at least pretending to. Again, I remember that sort of fluffing of lines at the start. He was obviously nervous about something. But think what you like about Starmer's strategy in terms of various aspects of running Labour right now. He's absolutely in his element here. He's a master prosecutor, that's what he is. Johnson needs to be rather more careful than he is appearing to be. And I think perhaps he knows it, which is maybe why there's been the nervous fluffing of lines at the start. He said, look, in terms of the initial payment, who made the initial payment? He said it was either the taxpayer, or it was the Conservative Party, or it was a private donor, or it was the Prime Minister. He said, I'm now making it easy for the Prime Minister. It's multiple choice. Another laugh. Even Johnson laughed at that one. And to which Johnson stood up and said, I've given him the answer, and the answer is that I have covered the cost. I'm thinking, well, and again, I wish Starmer had come up with this. As a criminal barrister, he could have done, couldn't he? This is like mugging an old lady for £20, getting caught, and then giving the money back. You still mugged the old lady. What we're trying to say is, did you mug the old lady? I paid her back. Yeah, but you'd still mugged her. You only paid her back when you got caught out. Boris Johnson has only covered the cost when he got caught out. And then he tried to go off on a tangent about the Electoral Commission investigation, which he and ahed through again, some of that, the stuff that he does when he's not quite sure, or not that he's not quite sure what to say, but he doesn't want to say the wrong thing or say too much. I think that's when he does that generally, especially saying too much when you've got a top lawyer opposite you. And then he said it was bizarre that Starmer was focusing on this issue. Now, for some people, that might be a fair point. What is Starmer talking about? He's talking about his first question, a comment that Boris Johnson may or may not have said. As far as some people are concerned, where's the proof? Now, there's a lot of media reporting on it, that the branches of the media that wouldn't report on something unless they believed it was true. But still, you know, we can believe who we might at this point. And now he's asking about sofas and wallpaper. Fair point. Is that really so serious? And some have asked, for example, as earlier in the week, they were asking, why are Labour focusing on the flat refurbishment when we've got all these dodgy deals over Brexit? This, considering all the corruption we've had over the last year or so, this is small fry. Absolutely. Even if this refurbishment is corrupt, it probably is. But even if it is, it's small compared to some of the other stuff. Why are Labour focusing on this? The reason, of course, is even though this wouldn't even feature in the top 100 most corrupt acts of Boris Johnson as Prime Minister, it's about what can stick. The other stuff hasn't been sticking. We've been hearing stories of these dodgy PPE contracts for months. For months. Been tearing my hair out. The public either haven't been hearing it or don't care. This is sticking. That's why Labour are going on about it. And then Starmer got up and said, Prime Minister, talking about priorities, what does he spend his time doing? This was a Prime Minister who during a pandemic was nipping out of meetings to choose wallpaper at £840 a roll. Last week he spent his time phoning journalists to moan about his old friend Dominic Cummings, and now he's telling the civil service to find out who paid for his flat. He said he's asked the Cabinet Secretary to investigate who paid for the refurbishment of the flat. Why doesn't the Prime Minister just tell him? Which is a fair point. Why has Boris Johnson gone to the Cabinet Secretary and said, find out who paid for my flat? Because surely the Cabinet Secretary should just go, Prime Minister, who paid for the refurbishment of your flat? Easy. That's the quickest investigation in history, isn't it? But no, got to make a big thing about it. Then Starmer brought up the revelation that Lord Brownlow, who's made a lord by the Tories and the beneficiary, although Starmer didn't say this, but it's been widely reported, is someone who has benefited from £120 million worth of government contracts. Now, that's not recently, by the way, that's over time. But he's also donated to the Tories over time. And Starmer was saying, about the allegation that he's been asked to pay £58,000 towards the cost. Again, this has been widely reported. He asked, did Lord Brownlow make that payment for that purpose? To which Johnson said, I think I've answered this question several times already. I'm thinking to myself, the only question you answered was the first one, which had nothing to do with this. And there's an awful lot of top journalists publishing it as a lie. Not at all fearful of any libel action, I might add. And then he waffled on about council tax again. So then Starmer got up and just said, answer the question. He actually sounded irritating. I think from his point of view, this was also an anticipated answer. I think this was a little bit of acting here, because I don't think Starmer is in the slightest bit frustrated by this. He's loving it. But he just got up and said, answer the question. That's what the public wants. They scream at their televisions every PMQs. Answer the question. Yes, can confirm, by the way. Except in my case, it's a computer monitor. But yes, I think quite a lot of us for the past year have just been yelling at it. Answer the bloody question. And so then Starmer said that the Prime Minister hasn't answered the question. He knows he hasn't answered the question. He never answers the question. Then, and again, this is why I always say with Starmer, like sometimes he does this. Sometimes he goes on about the fact that Johnson's not answering. I think he should do it all the time. Make it so that it's background noise. It's all the time. It's something you associate with PMQs. PM's evasions. Johnson does not answer the question. Focus people's minds on it. So that if someone just watches PMQs for the first time, maybe, it's already in their head that he doesn't answer the question. Then when they watch him, they listen to him, they go, oh yeah, he doesn't answer the question. Got something to hide. But anyway, then he reminded Johnson of the law concerning registering political donations. He said the rules are clear. The Electoral Commission now think that there are reasonable grounds to suspect that an offence may have occurred, which is why there's an investigation, of course. And then he stopped and he looked at the Prime Minister and said, that's incredibly serious. Does the Prime Minister believe that any rules or laws have been broken in retaliation to the refurbishment of the flat? To which Johnson stood up, went on the attack, and he said, no, I don't. That's the second time he's answered a question twice. Twice. It's lies, of course, but he's answered it. Can't say further than that. He was asked a yes-no question. He answered. This is astounding. Only the second time I think this may even be just the second time he's answered the whole year, and he's done it twice in the same PMQs. But the thing is, if that's the case, if he can quite clearly say no rules or laws have been broken, why doesn't he just answer the questions about where the money came from then? Then he went off on one saying that Starmer should be asking serious questions about the vaccine rollout or the pandemic, blah, 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 blah. He was quite agitated. Again, don't know whether it's genuine anger or whether it's just that, that bluff he does sometimes. Because it could be genuine anger that Starmer is honing in on areas of weakness, because he is known for hating it when people don't tell him how great he is. Again, I suppose part of having a privileged, entitled lifestyle, you can surround yourself with people who tell you how fantastic you are. He's very much like a Trump clone in that regard, definitely. But with Johnson, could just be an act. All part of brazening it out, pretending to be angry, outraged. So then Starmer, final question, number 6. Obviously, Johnson won't answer it. He never does. And he's just going to go off on a pre-prepared rant. Whatever Starmer asks, Johnson's got his script ready. He's just got it ready. It's not going to have anything to do with the questions, and it didn't. So Johnson will just carry on until either he runs out of wind or the speaker shuts him up, because that's happened before. So Starmer just used it to quote the Nolan principles, which are the principles by which ministers are supposed to conduct themselves and include such things as honesty. So the final question was more of a statement. Starmer said, so what we get, he reeled off the Nolan principle, said what we get instead is dodgy contracts, cash for access. And who's at the heart of it? The Prime Minister. He talks about priorities. Crime is going up. NHS waiting lists are at record levels. Millions of people are worried about their jobs, including Liberty Steel, who's getting the Hartlepool connection in there ahead of the by-election. He says, don't the public deserve a Prime Minister whom they can trust and a government that isn't mired in sleaze, cronyism and scandal? Like I say, it's not a serious question. You don't expect an answer, but he weren't going to get one anyway. So he wasn't even going to get a serious evasion on this one. And Johnson did grandstand. Oh, he went all over the place. Brought his pre-prepared rant that had nothing to do with any question that had been asked today. And it went on for I think it went on for about 3 minutes. He went quite red in the face. But anyway, Ian Blackford of the SNP. Now, this was interesting. So Ian Blackford started off with the statistic, 127,000 people have died from COVID in the UK. That's the official figure. The real figure is actually higher. And then Blackford also brought up the remark about Boris Johnson saying that he'd prefer the bodies to pile high rather than have another lockdown. Only, unlike Starmer, who just said, the media are reporting this, is it true? Blackford said it as if it's fact. He's not even messing about with whether it's true or not. It's true as far as he's concerned, not an allegation. He said that the BBC and ITV have confirmed sources that this is what the Prime Minister said. He said people are willing to go under oath to confirm it. It was interesting. I'd not heard that. He noted that, this is quite funny. Now, normally he can be he does go a bit too far sometimes, Blackford, but this was just on the edge. So Blackford said he noted that parliamentary rules prevent him from calling the Prime Minister a liar, which they do, you're not allowed to do that. But he said, but can I ask the question, are you a liar, Prime Minister? To which then Johnson, there was a bit of a pause at first. I wasn't sure if the Speaker was even going to allow the Prime Minister to answer it, but he did. And the Prime Minister started by saying he'd leave it to the Speaker as to whether the question was in order, at which point the Speaker responded that it was unsavoury and not what we would expect, but it was in order. In other words, you can't call Johnson a liar. You're not allowed to call an MP a liar or say anything disparaging about them, but you can ask them if they all want. So then Johnson said, well, if the right honourable gentleman is going to make such a statement, he should produce the author. Basically, it was the same response as to Starmer. It's also untrue, really, because you see, parliamentary privilege protects you from an awful lot of things. It actually allows an MP to come into Parliament and spout all sorts of stuff, free from the normal legal obligations applied to the rest of us. Like if I make up some crap about someone, like maliciously, I could be sued for slander. An MP can do it in Parliament. It's parliamentary privilege. Oh, you said this thing about me. Yeah, mate, it's parliamentary privilege, isn't it? If they got it badly wrong and they're a minister, they're expected to resign, sure, because they've misled Parliament, but, or at least correct the record if they did it inadvertently. But yeah, no one will touch them. That being said, Blackford, like Starmer, reeled off the list of organisations that are adamant that it is true. So when he says produce the author, it's like, already have done that. I mean, he hasn't produced the author that was there at the meeting, but, you know, he's cited where he got his information from. Then his second question was about, he said, you know, about the PM been dodging questions all about these corrupt proceedings all week. Try all year, mate, and before. And he said, when was, and again, very forthright, I like this about him. Sometimes, when Ian Blackford gets it right, he gets it right. He said, when was money funneled from Tory HQ to his personal bank account? When did he pay back this money? None of this messing about, I say messing about that Starmer's doing. Obviously, Starmer's doing it very carefully as a prosecutor. Ian Blackford's only got 2 questions, he ain't got time for that. When was the money? When did you pay the money back? Was it an interest-free loan? Who is the donor or donors who originally funded it? Not who originally funded it. Who are the donors or donors? We know it was. Is the Prime Minister going to publish these details today or wait until the police come knocking at the door? Although I have to say, though, they didn't come knocking at the door over the vote leave financing, which was declared unlawful. And they should have done. So I can't imagine they will over this. You know, if he nobbled the investigation into his dealings in vote leave, he'll absolutely nobble it into buying wallpaper. Even though they should do if he refuses to come clean. But he's got the police in his pocket. But another question echoing Starmer's. And like I said at the beginning, this increases the emphasis on the fact that this is where the political weakness in Johnson is. People going, because there might be people quite reasonably saying, is this really the thing to poke at? There's this corruption, this was worse, this was worse, this was worse. But it's not inspiring the public to talk about it. This is. And it is banal. And it is stupid that a few tens of thousands of pounds of corruption should be more scandalous than billions. You know, what's happened to test and trace? Where's all that money going? It's certainly not gone into test and trace. That's a real scandal. But do you know what? That's not firing the public's imagination. This is. And unfortunately, that's what politics is at times. And there have been times when both Starmer and Blackford have touched on similar themes, but I cannot remember a time when they were so in tune. They were asked, Blackford basically asked 2 questions that Starmer also asked. He did it in his own inimitable way, but they were the same questions and they got the same response. This is big. Johnson did nothing to bat this away. And you know what? This is going to be ridiculous. If this is the thing that brings Johnson down, it will be ridiculous. It's like Al Capone. Al Capone, all the terrible things he did. What did they get him on? Not paying his taxes. The stupidest conviction in history. You know, of all the serious... And again, people will say, all the serious things that Al Capone did, they got him on his taxes. Are you kidding me? This could be the same thing for Johnson. Of all the terrible things he's done, the thing that might get him is his sofa. And do you know why as well that it might get him? I don't want to talk too much. Johnson's escaped all sorts of scandals in his life. This doesn't reflect poorly on the Conservative Party. That's what might do it. Because to bring Johnson down, Labour can't bring Johnson down. The voting public can't bring Johnson down. No chance to do so for years. If Johnson's going to be brought down before the next general election, there's only one group of people that can do it. Conservative MPs. Conservative MPs are not going to do it in a way that damages their party because they want to be elected next time. But this, see all the COVID stuff, all the other corruption, public sector contracts, that is a reflection on the entire government, the whole Conservative Party, because they've all got their snouts in the trough there. This is particular to Boris Johnson. This doesn't implicate any other Tory MP. This is purely Boris Johnson. And that's why this is very, very dangerous for him. Because Tory MPs, if they decide they've had enough of him, if they decide he's a liability right now, could get him on this. They could shove him out the door over this, and it doesn't reflect poorly on them. Because it's nothing to do with them. But anyway, those are my thoughts. Let me know yours in the comments below. Hope you found the video interesting. If you did, don't forget to click the like button. And if you'd like to support the channel further, please also click the Patreon link for details. And until next time, I'll see you later.